Close your eyes if you would like. Let your body settle. Let your hands rest open. Let your shoulders drop. You have nothing to do right now. Nowhere to be. Nothing to hold. Tonight's story comes from Kyoto. Not the Kyoto of the cherry blossoms and the tourist maps. Not the Kyoto of the polished temples and the guided tours. But the older Kyoto. The Heian capital. The city of 1,000 years ago, when the streets were dark at night, when the gates of the city marked the boundary between the world of the living and the world of things that live differently, that move through the dark in ways the living preferred not to think about. At the southern end of the great avenue, at the edge of where the city ended and the darkness began, stood a gate. The Rajamon, the gate of the walled city. In later tellings it would be called the Rashomon, the word that has come down to us through centuries of stories and plays, and the great film that carries that name. But in the time this story describes, it was the Rajamon, the boundary gate, the place where the city met what lay beyond it. Something lived in that gate. Something that came out at night. Something that the people of the city knew was there and walked carefully around. This is its story, and the story of the man who went to meet it. The Heian capital at night. The city that had been built on a grid in the Chinese manner, with the imperial palace at the north and the great avenues running south, was, in the daylight hours, one of the most refined places in the world. Poetry was composed here. Ceremonies were performed here. The court gathered in its particular elegance, attended to the seasons, wore the correct colors for the correct months, composed verses about the moon and the plum blossoms, and the cry of the cuckoo in the early summer. But the daylight was only part of it. At night, the city changed. The lamps were few. The streets were dark in a way that modern cities have entirely forgotten. The darkness that fell on Heian, Kyoto, was real darkness, the kind that the body responds to with the old responses, the raised awareness, the attention directed outward, the knowledge that things move in the dark that do not move in the light. And the people of Heian did not dismiss this knowledge. They lived with it. They knew the names of the things that moved in the dark. They knew the places where those things were most likely to be found. They took precautions. They consulted the priests and the onmyoji, the yin-yang masters, who understood the geography of the unseen world and could tell you which directions were dangerous on which days, which gates should be avoided, which roads should not be taken after dark. The Rajamon was one of those places, the southern gate, the boundary, the place where the city ended and the dark country beyond began, the place where the demon lived. Minamoto no Yorimitsu, the general at the center of this story's world, the man whose name the legends gather around, whose household produced the warriors who became the heroes of the Heian period's great stories of demon fighting and courage. Yorimitsu was a real person. He lived from 948 to 1021. He served the Fujiwara clan, the great aristocratic family that dominated the Heian court, and he was valued by them for the thing that the aristocracy needed and preferred not to do itself, the management of force, the dangerous work, the clearing of the roads, the suppression of bandits, and the investigation of the strange reports that reached the capital from the provinces and the dark places. Around Yorimitsu gathered 4 men who became known as the Shuten, the 4 heavenly kings, Watanabe no Tsuna, Sakata no Kintoki, Usui Sadamitsu, Urabe Suetake, 4 warriors, each with his own reputation, each with his own particular quality of courage or skill or strangeness. Together, they were the force that Yorimitsu deployed when the problem was not a political problem or an administrative problem, but something older, something that the court poets and the ceremony masters and the yin-yang consultants could not address directly, that required a man with a sword willing to go where the demons were. Of the 4, Watanabe no Tsuna is the one who stands at the center of this story, the youngest of the 4 by some accounts, the one who went to the gate. Watanabe no Tsuna, born in 953, a man of the saga line of the Minamoto, of imperial blood several generations back, who had come to be called Watanabe after the place in Setsu province, near what is now Osaka, where his adoptive family lived. He was handsome, the stories say. This matters in the world of the Heike legends, where beauty and courage are not considered opposites, but expressions of the same quality, different faces of the same underlying virtue. The warrior who is also beautiful, who carries refinement alongside strength, who can compose a poem as well as wield a sword. This is the ideal that the Heian period had for its warriors. Tsuna, by the accounts, came close to it. He had served Yorimitsu since he was young, had built a reputation through the accumulated episodes of a warrior's life in the Heian capital, the investigations, the suppressions, the journeys into the dark places that a warrior of the 4 heavenly kings was expected to undertake. He had survived them, he had returned from them, he had acquired in returning the particular quality of the person who has been to the edge of things and come back. He carried a sword, not just any sword, the Higekiri, the beard cutter, a sword that had been made for Yorimitsu's father, that had passed down through the household, that carried in its making the particular quality of the best metalwork of the period, the folded iron, the specific hardness that the swordsmiths of the Heian period had learned to achieve through processes that were as close to sacred as craft gets. This was the sword he carried to the gate. The 4 warriors were drinking. A summer night in the Heian capital, the air still heavy with heat, the kind of evening when stories of demons and darkness feel appropriate, when the distance between the polished surface of the day and the rough underside of the night feels thinner than usual. The conversation turned to the Rajamon. There had been reports, the kind of reports that circulated in the Heian capital about certain places at certain times, accounts of strange sounds, of shadows that moved without sources, of travelers who had passed near the gate at night and arrived at their destinations with the particular pallor of people who had seen something they could not explain. The rumor was, a demon lived at the gate. One of the warriors, Sadamitsu, spoke. If there are demons at the gate, we should go and verify. Tsuna disagreed. We killed the demons at O Mountain, he said. There are no demons remaining. The argument went back and forth in the easy way of warriors drinking on a summer night, testing each other's courage through the medium of conversation, each daring the other toward the concrete action that the conversation was pointing toward. It was decided. Tsuna would go, alone, to the Rajamon, tonight. He would bring back proof that he had been there, a wooden plaque nailed to the gate with his name on it. He would go alone because going alone was the point. Anyone can be brave in company. The question was whether the courage held in the dark, without witnesses, with nothing to sustain it but itself. He rode south, through the streets of the capital, past the shuttered houses, past the dark temples, along the great avenue of Suzaku that ran from the imperial palace all the way to the southern gate. The avenue was empty. This is one of the things about the Heian capital at night that the sources return to: the emptiness. The streets that were full of people in the day were full of something else at night, or full of nothing at all, which amounts to the same thing when you are riding through them toward a gate that has the reputation the Rajomon had. He rode with the wooden plaque. He rode with the Higekiri at his side. He rode in the particular state of a person who has committed to doing something difficult and has passed the point where the decision can be revisited, the point where what was theoretical has become actual, where the courage that was easy to claim at the table has to manifest in the body that is riding through the dark. The gate came into view, the Rajomon, large, even in its decayed state. The great gate that had been built to mark the southern boundary of the capital, that had once been magnificent and was now, like many things at the edges of the city, beginning to return to something wilder than it had been. The wood was weathered, the tiles were broken in places, the paint that had once been vivid was faded to the color of old things that have been a long time in the rain. He dismounted. He approached. He nailed the plaque. And then something grabbed him. A hand, from above, from the darkness above the gate, where the upper structure rose into the starless night, a hand came down and seized him by the helmet. This is how the demon introduced itself, not with words, not with the elaborate challenge that the warrior tradition might expect. Just the hand, descending from the dark, seizing the most vulnerable point. Tsuna did not freeze. This is what the story preserves about him, in this moment, that he did not freeze. That the warrior's body, trained for years to respond to the sudden attack, to move before the mind has fully processed what is happening, did what it had been trained to do. He drew the Higekiri. He swung. The blade found the arm. In the dark, with the grip of the demon on his helmet pulling upward, with the horse somewhere behind him, with the empty avenue of the dead city stretching north, he swung the sword and cut. The hand released him. Something screamed. Or not screamed. Something made a sound that was not a human sound, that belonged to a different category of expression, the expression of something that has been hurt in a way it did not expect. And then it was gone. Up, into the dark. The sound of it fading into whatever the dark above the gate contained. Tsuna stood at the gate with a sword in his hand, and something on the ground beside him. An arm. A demon's arm. He brought the arm back, wrapped in cloth, carried carefully, the evidence of what had happened at the gate. The other warriors saw it. Yorimitsu was called. The arm was examined. It was not a human arm. The color was wrong. The proportions were wrong. The texture of the skin was wrong, in the particular way that the things of the Heian darkness were wrong when brought into the light, wrong enough to confirm that they belonged to a different order of being, not wrong enough to be entirely unfamiliar. An Onmyoji was consulted, Abe no Seimei, the great yin-yang master of the period, the man whose name appears in every story that involves the darker geography of the Heian world. His advice was precise. Keep the arm under lock and key. The demon will come back for it. Conduct a period of ritual seclusion. 7 days. Do not let anyone into your house. Do not open the door for anyone. 7 days, not 6, not 8, 7, and under no circumstances show the arm to anyone. Tsuna listened. He agreed. He put the arm away. He began the 7 days. It seemed straightforward enough. It was not straightforward. 6 days passed without incident. Tsuna stayed indoors. The arm stayed locked away. No one came. On the 7th day, someone knocked at the gate. A woman's voice, old, familiar, his aunt, his foster mother's sister, the woman who had helped raise him after his father's early death, who had been part of his childhood in the way that certain people are, reliably present, warm in the specific way of the older relative who has no direct claim on you and therefore no agenda, who simply appears in your life when you need them. She had come from far away, she said. She had heard he was confined to the house. She was worried. She wanted to see him, just for a moment, just to confirm with her own eyes that he was well. She was old. She had traveled far. Was he really going to turn away the woman who had loved him since he was a child? Tsuna hesitated. The advice had been clear. Do not let anyone in. But the voice was his aunt's voice. He knew that voice. He had known it all his life. How could he turn away the woman who had been a mother to him when his own mother was gone? He opened the door. She came in. She sat. She asked after his health. She spoke warmly, the way she always spoke, with the particular quality of someone who had known you since you were small and carried that knowledge gently. He answered her questions. He offered her tea, the ordinary ritual of the visit, the form that human contact takes when it is functioning normally, when the demon has not yet revealed itself. And then she asked, casually, as if it were just a detail, just something she had heard about and was curious about, the way an aunt might be curious about the details of a nephew's life. She had heard about the arm from the gate. Could she see it? Tsuna said no. He explained. He had been instructed not to show it to anyone. The Onmyoji had been explicit. 7 days, and no one to see the arm. She pressed him. Just a look. Just to satisfy her curiosity. She was family. Surely family was different. She had come all this way. She was old. He gave in. He retrieved the arm. He unwrapped it. He held it out. And the moment the arm was within reach, the old woman's hand shot out and seized it. And the old woman was no longer an old woman. The demon, the form it had taken, the old woman who had been warm and familiar and convincing, dissolved in the way that the demon forms of the Heian stories dissolve, suddenly, completely, without the gradual transition that human changes take. One moment, the aunt, the next, something else entirely. The Heian stories do not dwell on exactly what the demon looked like when it dropped its disguise. They are not those kinds of stories. What they dwell on instead is what it did. It grabbed the arm. It held it against the stump where the arm had been, and it went through the wall, or through the roof, or through the gap between what is solid and what is not, that demons of the Heian world could move through in ways humans could not. Through the Hafu, the gable end of the roof, the place where the demon exited was remembered specifically, because the memory of it became a tradition. The families of the Watanabe clan, the descendants of Tsuna, do not build gable ends on their houses even now, because that is where the demon went through. And then it was gone, into the night, with its arm. The house was empty. Tsuna was alone. The cloth that had held the arm was empty, and a hole in the roof let in the night air. Who was the demon? This is the question that the tradition has answered in different ways across the centuries, and the different answers tell us something about the different things the story was trying to say at different times. In some versions, the demon of the Rajomon is unnamed, a presence, a thing that lived at the gate. The story is about the gate as much as about the demon itself, about the boundary it marks and what inhabits boundaries in the Heian understanding. In other versions, the demon is Ibaraki Doji, the name that the later tradition gave to the demon of this story. Ibaraki Doji had been, before the demon became a demon, something else. A beautiful young person from the province of Setsu, born with teeth already grown, with a wildness that the family could not manage, that drove them to abandon her in the mountains where the wildness became what it was always going to become, a demon. She had found her way to O Mountain, to the household of Shuten Doji, the great demon king of the mountain, and had become his retainer, his most trusted companion, the second in command of the demon stronghold that Yorimitsu and his 4 heavenly kings had destroyed. When Shuten Doji died, when the mountain was taken and the demons scattered, Ibaraki Doji was one of the few who escaped, and she went to the gate, and she waited. Shuten Doji, the name means the boy who drinks sake, the great demon of O Mountain, the king of the demons who had terrorized the Heian capital by descending from their mountain stronghold and taking people, young women primarily, the daughters of the nobility, taken from the capital and carried to the mountain, where the demon court kept them against their will, in circumstances that the stories describe with the particular indirection of tales that want to convey horror without naming it directly. The scale of it was significant. It was not 1 or 2 disappearances, but a pattern, a sustained series of takings that the capital had been unable to stop and had been unable to explain fully until the reports began to cohere into the understanding that there was a place, a specific place, from which this was being organized, Oi Mountain, the mountain at the western edge of the Kinai region, where the Tanba Highlands began, and the roads into the interior passed through the narrow valleys, watched by whatever watched those valleys. Yorimitsu was given the mission. He and his 4 warriors, and the warrior Fujiwara, no Yasumasa, disguised themselves as Yamabushi, as mountain ascetics, and walked into the mountain. They found the stronghold. They were received as guests, in the way that the Demon King received guests, with the particular hospitality of someone who does not need to fear his guests. They drugged him, they waited until he was helpless, and they took his head. This is the Oi Mountain story, the Shuten Doji story, that precedes the Rajomon story, the context that explains why Tsuna told his friends that the demons had been dealt with. He had been there. He had seen the mountain taken. He had helped. He was wrong that it was over. There was still Ibaraki Doji. There was still the gate. Oni, the word we translate as demon, as ogre, as devil, but none of these translations quite captures what Oni means in the Japanese tradition. The Oni is not simply evil. It is something more complex than that. It is what happens at the edges of the human world, at the places where the human meets the not quite human, where the categories that organize the daylight life break down into something older, something that the categories were developed to contain, but cannot fully contain. The Oni has a body. This is important. It is not a ghost. not a spirit. It has flesh. It can be wounded. Its arm can be cut off. This physicality is part of what makes the Oni so useful as a figure in the Japanese imagination. It is the thing that is dangerous and embodied, that requires the physical response, the sword, rather than the prayer. The Oni is large. It is strong. It can change shape. In its natural form, it has horns and wild hair, and the particular appearance of something that has grown beyond the limits of the human. But it can also take human form. It can appear as a beautiful woman. It can appear as an old person traveling the road, as a figure of harmless familiarity. This is the part that the story of Tsuna and the Gate is most interested in. The demon that wears a familiar face. Not the demon at the gate, which is terrifying but honest, which attacks directly and can be fought directly. But the demon in the house, wearing the face of someone trusted. The sword, the Higekiri, the beard cutter, one of the most famous swords in the entire tradition of Japanese swordsmanship, not because of its beauty, not because of its age, but because of what it did. It cut the arm of a demon. The sword had been made for Yorimitsu's father, commissioned from a swordsmith, forged in the particular way that the best swords of the Heian period were forged, with the specific combination of hard and soft iron that gives the Japanese sword its characteristic quality, the ability to hold an edge while not being so brittle that it breaks. It had passed from Yorimitsu's father to Yorimitsu himself, and from Yorimitsu to Tsuna, the gift of a lord to his most trusted warrior, the passing of the sword, that is also the passing of authority, the recognition of the person capable of carrying what the sword represents. After the night at the gate, the sword was renamed, from the Higekiri, the beard cutter, to the Onikiri Maru, the demon cutter. Not just renamed, understood differently. The sword that had cut a demon's arm was now a sword that had a history, a specific act to be remembered in connection with it, a status that went beyond the usual status of an excellent weapon. This sword still exists, or a sword identified as this sword still exists at the Kitano Tenmangu Shrine in Kyoto, where it is kept as one of the shrine's treasures. Whether it is exactly the sword that Tsuna carried to the gate, whether the sword in the shrine is the sword in the story, is the kind of question that cannot be definitively answered. But the sword is there. Old iron, old name, old story. Abe no Seimei, the name that appears in every story that touches the dark geography of the Heian world. He was an onmyoji, a master of the yin-yang arts, the system of divination and cosmology that the Heian court had imported from China and developed into its own particular form. He lived from 921 to 1005. He served the court for decades, providing the guidance that the aristocracy required for the navigation of the invisible world. Which days were auspicious, which directions were dangerous, which rituals would protect against which threats, which of the strange things that were reported from the dark places of the city required intervention, and what kind of intervention was appropriate. His advice to Tsuna was sound. 7 days, no visitors, the arm locked away. The 7-day period of ritual seclusion was a specific practice, the monomi, designed for exactly this kind of situation. The situation in which a person had encountered something from the other world and needed to allow the boundary between the worlds to reseal itself before returning to ordinary life. Tsuna followed the advice for 6 days. On the 7th day, he failed. Not from courage, not from warrior's pride, from something older and harder to resist, the belief that the person who appeared at his door was who she appeared to be. The demon knew what it was doing. It chose the face it wore because it knew that this particular face was the one Tsuna could not turn away. Seimei had told him, "Let no one in." But Seimei had not said, "Your aunt will come. Your foster mother's sister, the woman who was warmth in your childhood, will come to your door on the 7th day and ask to see you." Against this specific test, the general instruction was not enough. The gate. In the Heian understanding of the world, gates were not merely architectural features. They were cosmological ones, the boundary between inside and outside, between the city and what lay beyond it, between the ordered world and the unordered world, was a real boundary, not a metaphor, a place where different conditions applied, where the rules that governed the daylight world held less firmly. The Rajamon stood at the southern end of the great avenue of Suzaku. From the imperial palace at the northern end of the city to the Rajamon at the south, the avenue ran straight and wide, the spine of the capital, the axis along which the imperial power organized itself. The palace was the sacred center. The gate was the profane edge. Between them, the city, all its layers and negotiations, its ceremonies and its crimes, its poetry and its poverty. At the edge, the demons lived. This is not accidental. The Oni of the Japanese tradition live at the margins, at mountain passes, at river crossings, at city gates, at the places where one thing ends and another begins. The margin is their territory because the margin is where the categories fail, where the rules of the inside do not yet apply, and the rules of the outside no longer apply, where something else is possible. Tsuna went to the margin. The margin received him in the way that margins do. The Oni in Japanese culture is everywhere, not as a figure of pure terror, not as the unequivocal villain, but as something more complicated, the outsider, the excess, the thing that is too much for the ordinary world to contain. At Setsubun, the bean-throwing festival at the turning of the year, the Oni is driven away. Someone wears the demon mask. Someone else throws the beans. Demons out. Fortune in. This is done with noise and laughter. Children participate. The Oni is terrifying and also funny, threatening and also familiar, the thing you drive away and the thing you recognize. The children's game of Onigako, what we would call tag. The person who is it, who chases the others, is the Oni. The demon is the one who pursues. The ones who run are the human. The game is the eternal game of the human and the demon. The chasing, the running, the touch that changes everything. In kendo, in sumo, in martial arts of all kinds, the word Oni is used for the person who is fighting at their best, the one who has entered the zone of ferocious focus, who is not quite themselves, who has become something larger and more terrifying than the ordinary person. The Uchibenke, the Oni, who is fierce at home, mild outside. The expression acknowledges the demon potential in everyone. The Oni is us, at the edge, at the gate, in the dark. The Watanabe family, the descendants of Tsuna, the people who carry his name into the present. There is a tradition among the Watanabe that has persisted for 1,000 years. They do not need to throw beans at Setsubun, because the Oni fear the Watanabe name, because the Oni know what a Watanabe did at the gate, because the descendants of the man who cut the demon's arm carry in their name a warning that the demons recognize. This is the kind of tradition that is impossible to verify historically and unnecessary to verify historically. Its truth is not the truth of the archive. Its truth is the truth of the identity, the particular story that a family tells about itself across the generations. We are the family of Tsuna. Our ancestor went to the gate. Our ancestor cut the demon's arm. The demons remember us. And the houses of the Watanabe are built without the gable end, the hafu, the place where the demon went through when it stole back its arm from Tsuna's house. The absence of the architectural feature is the architectural memory of the demon's departure. The building style says, "We know what came through here. We are not inviting it back." The Rajamon today, there is almost nothing left. The gate that stood at the southern end of the avenue of Suzaku, that marked the boundary of the Heian capital, that was the home of the demon in the story of Tsuna, is gone. It fell into disrepair in the Heian period itself. The western half of the capital, which included the area around the southern gate, was the less prosperous half, the half that the population had gradually abandoned in favor of the eastern half, where the major temples and the aristocratic estates had concentrated. The gate that had been magnificent when the city was first built became, over the centuries, something closer to what Tsuna found when he rode south, weathered, broken, inhabited by the things that inhabit abandoned places. A small stone marker now stands near where the gate stood, in a parking lot in what is now Toji, the southern part of Kyoto. The marker says, "Here stood the Rajamon." The parking lot does not know what stood here. The cars do not know. But the marker remembers, and the story remembers, and the tradition of the Watanabe family remembers. The gate is gone. The story is here. The story became theater. As the great stories of Japan tend to become theater, tend to find their way into the No and the Kabuki, that carry them from the era in which they were told into the eras that followed. The No play Rashomon. In the No version, the setting has shifted from the Ichijo Modori Bridge, where some versions of the story locate the original encounter, to the Rajamon itself. This is what the No tradition does. It takes the core of the story and gives it the setting that is most resonant, most meaningful, most laden with the weight of what the story is trying to say. The gate is the right setting for the No version, because the gate is the boundary, and the story is about what happens at the boundary. In the No play, Tsuna goes to the gate. He encounters the demon. He cuts the arm. The play ends there. The No Rashomon is about the encounter, not the aftermath. The demon in its full ferocity, the warrior who does not flinch. The Kabuki play Ibaraki is about what comes after. The demon in the house, the aunt who is not the aunt, the moment when trust becomes the weapon turned against the trusting. Together, the two plays cover the full arc of the story, the encounter and its consequence, the courage and its cost, the demon at the gate and the demon that comes through the roof. What does the story of Tsuna and the demon mean? There are the obvious meanings: the courage to go to the dark places, the warrior who faces what others fear, the cost of a single moment of weakness, of sentimentality, that undoes what the courage achieved. But there is something else. The demon chose its form carefully. It could have appeared as anything. It could have appeared as a stranger, a figure of no particular significance, someone whose face carried no weight. It chose the aunt, the person whose face represented not threat, but care. Not the dangerous world, but the safe one. Not what Tsuna feared, but what he loved. This is the more interesting part of the story, not the courage at the gate, which is the expected part, the part the warrior's identity prepared for, but the failure in the house, which is the unexpected part, the part where the warrior's training offered no help. You cannot train for the demon that wears the face of your love. You can be told, let no one in, and you will find, when the one who comes is the one whose face you know best, that the instruction dissolves in the warmth of recognition. This is what the story knows about human beings, that we can be brave in the face of the unknown. What is harder is to be appropriately suspicious in the face of the familiar. The demon counted on this. The demon was right. The Rajamon today, there is almost nothing left. The gate that stood at the southern end of the avenue of Suzaku, that marked the boundary of the Heian capital, that was the home of the demon in the story of Tsuna, is gone. It fell into disrepair in the Heian period itself. The western half of the capital, which included the area around the southern gate, was the less prosperous half, the half that the population had gradually abandoned in favor of the eastern half, where the major temples and the aristocratic estates had concentrated. The gate that had been magnificent when the city was first built became, over the centuries, something closer to what Tsuna found when he rode south, weathered, broken, inhabited by the things that inhabit abandoned places. A small stone marker now stands near where the gate stood, in a parking lot in what is now Toji, the southern part of Kyoto. The marker says, "Here stood the Rajamon." The parking lot does not know what stood here. The cars do not know. But the marker remembers, and the story remembers, and the tradition of the Watanabe family remembers. The gate is gone. The story is here. The story became theater. As the great stories of Japan tend to become theater, tend to find their way into the No and the Kabuki, that carry them from the era in which they were told into the eras that followed. The No play Rashomon. In the No version, the setting has shifted from the Ichijo Midori Bridge, where some versions of the story locate the original encounter, to the Rajamon itself. This is what the No tradition does. It takes the core of the story and gives it the setting that is most resonant, most meaningful, most laden with the weight of what the story is trying to say. The gate is the right setting for the No version, because the gate is the boundary, and the story is about what happens at the boundary. In the No play, Tsuna goes to the gate. He encounters the demon. He cuts the arm. The play ends there. The No Rashomon is about the encounter, not the aftermath. The demon in its full ferocity, the warrior who does not flinch. The Kabuki play Ibaraki is about what comes after. The demon in the house, the aunt who is not the aunt, the moment when trust becomes the weapon turned against the trusting. Together, the two plays cover the full arc of the story, the encounter and its consequence, the courage and its cost, the demon at the gate and the demon that comes through the roof. What does the story of Tsuna and the demon mean? There are the obvious meanings: the courage to go to the dark places, the warrior who faces what others fear, the cost of a single moment of weakness, of sentimentality, that undoes what the courage achieved. But there is something else. The demon chose its form carefully. It could have appeared as anything. It could have appeared as a stranger, a figure of no particular significance, someone whose face carried no weight. It chose the aunt, the person whose face represented not threat, but care, not the dangerous world, but the safe one, not what Tsuna feared, but what he loved. This is the more interesting part of the story, not the courage at the gate, which is the expected part, the part the warrior's identity prepared for, but the failure in the house, which is the unexpected part, the part where the warrior's training offered no help. You cannot train for the demon that wears the face of your love. You can be told, let no one in, and you will find, when the one who comes is the one whose face you know best, that the instruction dissolves in the warmth of recognition. This is what the story knows about human beings, that we can be brave in the face of the unknown. What is harder is to be appropriately suspicious in the face of the familiar. The demon counted on this. The demon was right. The night and the demon. There is a reason that the demon lives at night. In the Heian stories and in all the stories of all the cultures that have given their demons a home in the dark. Night is when the boundary thins, the categories that organize the day, the distinctions between this and that, between safe and dangerous, between known and unknown, become less reliable in the dark. The familiar shape is less recognizable. The familiar voice is more easily imitated. The path is less clear. Tsuna rode south in the dark, not at noon, not in the daylight. The night was the condition under which the encounter was possible, and the demon came back in the dark as well. Not literally. The demon came in the day, through the door, but it came wearing the night's gift, the disguise that the dark confers on things that should not be trusted, the cover that familiarity provides to the thing that is not what it appears to be. Sleep is also a kind of dark. The crossing into sleep is the nightly passage through the gate of consciousness from the waking world into the other one. Every night, reliable as the sunset, the body knows how to make this crossing. It has been making it since the first night of your life. The demons of the Heian stories do not come into sleep. They come at the gate, at the threshold, at the moment before the crossing. Once you are through, once the sleep has taken you, you are somewhere else, somewhere the demon's arm does not reach. Let the gate be behind you. Let the dark be the dark of the other side, the one that carries you rather than threatens you, the one that restores. Rest well. Heian Kyoto and the present. The city that Tsuna rode through is under the city that exists today. The grid of the Heian capital, the great avenues running north and south, east and west, is the grid of modern Kyoto. Not exactly. The city has changed, but the bones are there, visible in the street names, in the logic of the address system, in the way the city still orients itself toward the north and the mountains. The avenue of Suzaku, the great north-south road that Tsuna rode on the night of the wager, is partly the modern Senbon-dori. The imperial palace has moved from the original northern position. The western half of the capital that was abandoned in the Heian period is now a fully inhabited part of the modern city. But if you walk south along Senbon-dori, toward Toji, toward the area near the Rajamon marker, you are walking the road that Tsuna rode, the same direction, the same south, the same dark gathering at the end of the avenue. The demon is gone, or no demon has been reported at that particular location in recent centuries. The Rajamon marker stands in the parking lot. The cars come and go. The city moves around the spot where the gate was, with the indifference of the city to its own past. But the story is here, has always been here, will be here when the parking lot is gone and something else has replaced it. The story outlasts the gate. The story outlasts the demon. The story outlasts everything except the need to tell it and the need to hear it in the dark before sleep. What remains of the story? The arm is gone. The demon took it back. The gate is gone. The city has moved on. What remains? The name Watanabe, one of the most common surnames in Japan. Millions of people carry it. Most of them do not think, when they write their name, about the man who rode south on a summer night and cut the arm of a demon. But some of them know the story, and some of those who know it still do not throw the beans at Setsubun, and some of their houses are still built without the gable end. The memory lives in the name. The name carries the story. The story explains the name. The prints, the ukiyo-e images of the moment at the gate are in museums now. You can look at them. The demon descending. The warrior not flinching. The sword about to find its mark. Someone looked at these images in the Edo period and understood immediately what they depicted. Someone looks at them now and needs the label to explain. But the image still communicates something even without the label. Something about the threshold. Something about what happens when you go to the edge of the known world and something reaches down from above. The courage. This is what the story ultimately preserves. Not the sword, not the arm, not the gate or the demon or the ant who was not the ant. The courage of going, the willingness to ride south in the dark toward the thing that was there. This is the thing that stories keep better than archives, keep it better than monuments keep it. The courage of the specific person in the specific dark, going toward the specific thing that needed facing 1,000 years ago. Still here, still worth knowing. Rest well, sleep well. There is something about this story that belongs to the hours before sleep, not because it is frightening, or not only because it is frightening, but because it is honest about the dark. The Heian people did not pretend the dark was nothing. They did not fill it with the easy explanations that the modern world provides. The street light, the night light, the phone in the hand that connects you to the grid of human presence at any hour. They lived with the dark as dark, with the gate as a real boundary, with the things beyond the gate as real things. And in living with it honestly, they found something that the story preserves. The courage is possible, not because the dark is not there, not because the demon is not real, but in spite of these things, with full knowledge of them. Tsuna rode south. He knew what was at the gate. He went anyway. This is the thing the story offers to the person lying in the dark before sleep. Not the reassurance that there is nothing to fear, but the example of someone who was afraid and went anyway, who brought the evidence back, who sat with a locked box for 6 days, who, on the 7th day, in a moment of human warmth, let the demon in, and who survived that too, and who was still Watanabe no Tsuna after it all. The gate is there, the dark is there, and you have what you have. Rest now. The gate stands at the edge of the city, or it stood there. The gate is gone now. The parking lot has forgotten what it replaced, but the story remembers. Watanabe no Tsuna rode south on a summer night 1,000 years ago. He nailed his plaque to the gate. Something grabbed him. He cut its arm. He brought the arm home. He locked it away. He kept the seclusion for 6 days. On the 7th day, the demon wore his aunt's face, and he let it in, and it took back what it had lost. The story does not end with triumph. It ends with the demon going through the roof with its arm, and Tsuna standing in the empty house, and the hole in the ceiling, letting in the night air. This is a strange ending for a hero story, and also the true ending, because the hero went to the gate, and the demon came for what was his, and the world continued as before. The gate still there, the demon still out there somewhere, the city still sleeping on either side of the great avenue. Nothing was resolved. Everything was learned. The courage at the gate was real. The failure in the house was real. Both of them are in the story. Both of them are in the person. Let both of them rest now. The gate is far away. The night is here. The city is quiet. Rest well. Sleep well. Good night. New Japanese stories every day on Quiet Tales of Japan. See you again for your next sleep.